This podcast covers noun compounds. Noun compounds are sometimes called nominal compounds. Nominal just means having to do with a noun. And they are structures in which one noun modifies another. So noun 1 modifies noun 2 that follows it. For example, university policy, right, tells whose policy. Or lady terps tells you what kind of terps. Now, some grammar books will incorrectly say that that first noun becomes an adjective. It doesn't. It remains a noun, but it modifies a second noun. Noun compounds are frequently used by journalists because they condense information, but you do have to keep an eye on them because they also can imply the existence of a category, and that may or may not be a category you want to imply the existence of. And yes, it's perfectly okay for me to end that sentence with a preposition, by the way. Let's take a look at how they can condense information. Journalism professor, a professor of journalism, a professor who teaches in the College of Journalism. It's just shorter to say journalism professor. Staff problems, problems that the staff is having or problems people are having with the staff. Staff problems, shorter, easier. Building maintenance, rather than maintenance of the buildings. Pentagon briefing, a briefing at or by the Pentagon. 86-car pileup, again, shorter than a pileup involving 86 cars. Transportation secretary instead of secretary of transportation, very, very common. Some examples, ripped, as they say, from today's headlines, or rather ripped from some more or less recent-ish headline-like things. By the way, you'll often find noun compounds in headlines, precisely because they condense information. Very, very useful in a headline. British stage prison rescue, a rescue from a prison. Church fire ruled arson. Now, this is an interesting case because the interest in condensing ran afoul of the tendency to create categories. There were a number of fires in a particular part of the South, lots and lots of cases involving churches. And both journalists and police were a little bit misled, I think, because they called them church fires. And so they were looking for people who might want to set fire to a church. When they finally found the perpetrators, they were just ordinary arsonists, but they were interested in places that were predictably empty at certain times and had lots and lots of flammable material. So they were setting fire to churches because they have those characteristics. They were setting fire to other places as well, but for a long time people didn't really connect the other fires to the fires at churches. So this is a case where church fire implies a category that in fact was not accurate. Detail pay. Now, detail pay refers to overtime pay that people like firefighters or police may get for serving in an extra detail, let's say guarding during a special event that the governor is attending or something along those lines. So that's a special category of pay. And of course, Boston firefighters are firefighters employed by or in the city of Boston. Pandemic preparedness, and preparedness for a pandemic. And Haiti official, I think that shortens it just slightly from Haitian official. And vote count, of course, the count of votes. Again, you do have to be careful because noun compounds do create or imply at least a category. A personnel carrier isn't just a carrier that happens to have personnel on it. It's usually specially designed to move people around as opposed to moving cargo around. Emergency management is different from other types of management. It's a special category all unto itself. Airline food. Well, I've heard people argue pretty convincingly that airline food is a category all unto itself and quite possibly not really food. Guantanamo prisoners, again, an interesting problem. If they form a separate category, if we can mentally think of them as a separate category, then we're going to find some excuses to treat them differently than we would treat other prisoners. So having this category of Guantanamo prisoners creates some interesting problems. Holocaust survivor. And here again we have a specialized category. There are many people who survived the Holocaust. Not all of them were victims. We use the term Holocaust survivor for specifically victims of the Holocaust who were in danger of losing their lives and who survived. So it's used specifically for victims. And student union. Now there are cases where you could, I guess, have students form a union, but student union usually refers to a particular building in which a variety of university functions directly connected with students are located. It is possible sometimes to overdo the noun compounds. And here's an example. This is from Time magazine, and it's a photo caption. And very often photo captions, trying to condense a lot of information into a very short space, overdo the noun compounds a bit. Vice President Dick Cheney daughter Mary and her partner Heather Poe attend the Republican National Convention Wednesday, September 1st, 2004 in New York. This is a case where I would really like to see an apostrophe S on the name Cheney. It would make sense if it was Vice President Dick Cheney's daughter Mary and her partner Heather Poe, but in fact that's not what they put. You can kind of see how it happened. You could talk about Dick Cheney's daughter Mary, right? Two nouns right together. In that case, Mary would be in apposition to daughter. And you could imagine, for example, Cheney and daughter Mary as a case where that was used. It makes some sense then. I guess you could talk about a Cheney daughter. It's much easier if there's two of them or plurals, as in the Bush twins. That becomes a lot easier. I guess the Cheney daughters makes a little more sense, but Cheney daughter doesn't. It sounds a bit odd. Cheney daughter Mary, that almost works, but once you've got anything this long, Vice President Dick Cheney daughter Mary, I think there's just a little bit too much detail early in that for it to quite work. So I think that really was a case of pushing it. You do have to be careful with noun compounds because they can be ambiguous. For example, police shooting clearly involves the police. Is it the police doing the shooting, or is it a police officer being shot? Someone shot a police officer. Staff problems, as I mentioned before, can be problems with the staff or problems the staff is having. Cartoon riots can be riots in a cartoon, riots inspired by a cartoon, or perhaps even cartoonish riots. You could imagine a fraternity, for example, putting together a fake riot and having it described as a cartoon riot. It isn't a real riot. Topless photos, we usually know what that means, a photo of someone who is topless and shouldn't be, usually, or is not expected to be. But it could also be a photo from which the top has been removed. You could imagine photos that were damaged such that the top of the photo was removed, and they could be, I guess, called topless photos. But you do need to be clear about what you're talking about. And there can be a problem if you are a journalist and you write down a noun compound. You know what you mean, but very often your reader may not. So that is what you need to know about noun compounds.